Just about every major government has been guilty of false flag operations to foment war. America has been guilty of several, but here are just a few. Civilian passengers were when a torpedo hit the Lusitania. Investigations revealed that explosives were inside the ship, which was operated by war profiteer J.P. Morgan. This event is what brought Americans, who were not previously interested in getting involved, into World War I, where they lost over 100,000 sons and daughters. They were also not interested in getting involved in World War II, but after breaking Japanese encryption codes, the U.S. government knew of their plans to attack Pearl Harbor. But the big banks were funding both sides and expected massive profits. So they let it happen to encourage Americans to sacrifice nearly 500,000 of their children in the Second World War. In August of 1964, the USS Maddox and the Turner Joy knowingly lied about being fired upon by North Vietnamese ships. For 2 hours, they fired at nothing and maneuvered as if under attack. President Johnson was aware of this deception, but kept it secret to initiate war against North Vietnam and to sacrifice over 50,000 Americans. This was used as a catalyst for the endless destruction of several nations that continues today. Professor Stephen Starr, associate of the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation, was recently on Russia's Solovyev Live, where he discussed a plan being suggested by NATO forces in Germany that stinks of plans for a false flag operation to usher in World War III. They have suggested a scenario wherein Russia sinks an American cruiser in the Black Sea, followed by the United States attacking Russian ships with nuclear warheads, which would then be followed by a Russian nuclear strike against NATO headquarters and a major U.S. nuclear attack on all of Russia. They suggested more than 3,000 strikes within 1 hour and the destruction of all major cities in Europe and the United States. Professor Starr said this would result in 150 million tons of smoke and soot that would block out 70% of the sunlight in the Northern Hemisphere and last about 10 years. It's important to note that it's been NATO forces alone who have been provoking war with Russia for decades, surrounding their border with missile systems and bioweapons labs, and overthrowing Ukraine with CIA color revolutions. The facts show that Russia has been given no choice but to defend themselves against deceptive Western aggression. The anti-human globalist forces that hold a firm grip on America are clearly trying to destroy it from within. The globalists want the United States to be plundered and destroyed, but they need a scapegoat to blame it on, and they've clearly chosen Russia for that role. During the American Revolution, Catherine the Great of Russia unofficially supported the colonies by trading with them. Russian ships began delivering hemp, sail linen, and iron to American ports as early as 1763. During the War of 1812, Russia attempted to join as a third-party mediator in support of American independence. In 1863, Russia sent military fleets to New York and San Francisco to put pressure on the British and fight them if necessary. They patrolled the American shores for 10 months. This Russian support of a sovereign America is undoubtedly what led to the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917, when the country fell into communist rule for 69 years. Today, Russia has asked for peace, but the evil powers that want endless war cannot survive unity between the East and the West. False flag operations are the modus operandi of the globalists.
These are the questions that President Trump asked. And I answered, we don't need to be there. And I explained how long we had been in these places, anywhere from 30, 40, 50 to 70 years, including Korea and Okinawa. And, there was no good answer. I think a lot of it is inertia and complacency. Well, we've been there this long. Well, what difference does it make? We've been there for X number of years, and it becomes part of the bureaucratic structure in the services. It becomes a mission factory. Now we have something for everybody to do. We can expand the command structure. And all of a sudden you walk up and say, well, I want you to vacate 400 of these bases overseas. And here's the list I want you to get out of. And everyone is apoplectic. The same thing is true in Europe in a place like Germany. What are we doing there? Anybody who tells you that we're there to deter the Russians should immediately be dismissed and sent home. That's nonsense. There's nothing to stop the Russians if they want to do whatever they want to do. We found that out in Ukraine. And we're not interested in going to war with Russia. So again, what are we doing with forces there? Are we encouraging belligerence on the part of our allies? Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, Poland? Sometimes it looks that way. Well, that's what we've done in Ukraine, and we've gotten 500,000 people killed over there. This is insane. But it's complacency, it's neglect, it's ego. Everything is mortgaged to vanity. That was the problem with the British Empire in 1946-47. And suddenly the Brits were told, well, we're broke. Our debt to GDP ratio is 240%. We can't maintain ourselves in India anymore. People still said, well, we've always been in India. What are you talking about? This is our country. And it wasn't their country. It was someone else, assuming that NATO holds together between now and the election. And I don't think it's a stretch to suggest that it may not. The NATO and the EU, to a large extent, have been crumbling in various ways for years now. I think NATO in particular, assuming it does survive into 2025, I would tell him that these are the terms for our continued membership in this alliance. Number one, you're going to have to pick a 4-star from the European countries to become the supreme commander of Allied Powers Europe. Number two, we're withdrawing our forces. You're going to have to be your own first responder. Now, we can come in and support you if you get entangled in something, depending upon what you do, because the danger, of course, whenever a large power like the United States commits itself to a very small power, the small power then is in charge of your military capability. That's what happened to the Tsar of Russia in 1914. He went to the aid of Serbia. It destroyed his country and he lost a war. We don't want to go down that path. So we have to be discerning about what we will or won't do. But the first step is to say, we want to support you and assist you in whatever way we can, but we're not staying in Europe. We're going to go home, and we've got other fish to fry here, and you're going to have to pick somebody who's a European 4-star. Now, once you say that, I doubt very seriously that the Europeans will want us to stay, to be honest. Whenever the administration has spoken about problems on the ground that they don't like, it's been talk, no action. No one has stood up and said, my dear friends in Israel, if you persist in this course of action, I'm going to have to withdraw U.S. forces from the area. We have moral obligations. We are not insensitive to the sufferings of people who may not be Israelis, who are in fact Arabs, Muslims, and Christians. We're not siding against you. We're simply telling you that we've come as far as we can. We cannot move any further. I think Israelis in the past have heard that argument. They haven't always liked it, but I think they understand it. Mr. Netanyahu has never heard that. I don't think he will from this administration. I think whatever they say publicly is just irrelevant. They're going to stay the course and try to give the Israelis the time to wipe out Gaza as a living space for the people that were there, and try to herd whoever survives into Egypt or somewhere else. We're not a signatory to a whole range of treaties that would involve this. We don't support the International Court of Justice in The Hague. You could find plenty of reasons to prosecute Americans for things that were done in Iraq and probably Afghanistan. We're not signatories. We don't believe it. We don't support it. It's never going to happen. But the argument that will be launched in your direction is a very straightforward one. What are we supposed to do about the building that was destroyed? What are we supposed to do about these things? Now, you brought up the 2,000-pound bombs dropped on a refugee camp. That's a much different animal. Let's face it. But having said that, in the rest of these things, you're going to do whatever is in the interest of your force to minimize your losses, and you try not to civilians who happen to be there. But you're going to get the argument, well, if they had any sense, we warned them to leave, they shouldn't have been there. And I just don't think that you can make that argument in a court of law against the Israeli Defense Force. They're winning on the ground, but they're losing the moral high ground. I don't see how you can do one and not the other. You know, it's incomprehensible to me. If you're losing the moral high ground, then whatever fight you're pushing is not going to work anyway. And again, this is my point at the beginning. In this sort of no holds bar, we've had it. Gaza has to go. The people there have been a permanent threat to us. We're not going to tolerate this anymore. They've all got to go. That is the end of any future relationship that Israel could possibly have with anyone in the region. That's the problem. There is no way forward after that. And at some point, and I can't predict when, the region will rise up and they are going to have a tough time surviving it.